After studying this module, you shall be able to have a basic idea of what validity in qualitative tradition entails and how it deviates from the traditional sense of validity used in quantitative methods. Know about two general approaches to validity broadly employed by qualitative researchers. Understand how validity concerns change with respect to different purpose of qualitative research. Appreciate a holistic view of validity in qualitative research employed by considering various approaches. Introduction. This module describes the process of establishing validity in qualitative research by first explaining validity in positivistic tradition, and then it points how validity in qualitative heritage differs from it and what criteria are involved in its determination. It then talks about the two broad approaches used to ascertain validity in qualitative research and how validity concerns varies owing to the different purpose of carrying out the research. It lastly advocates the view of having a holistic approach to validity determination in qualitative research paradigm. Validity in quantitative measurement. In quantitative research, validity determines whether the test developed truly measures the concept which it was intended to measure and how truthful the research results are. Within this research perspective, validity is rather the correlation of the test with some outside independent criteria, which are regarded by the experts as the best measure of trait ability being measured by the test. Researchers generally determine validity by asking a series of questions and will often look for the answers in the research of others. In quantitative tradition, validity results from the culmination of various empirical concepts such as objectivity, evidence, actuality, reasoning about facts, deduction and mathematical data. In this sense, validity simply represents the evidences supporting the inference that is made out by the researcher on the basis of the test scores. In a broad sense, validity is concerned with generalizability. A measure which is valid means that its conclusions can be generalized in relation to the general population. Validity in quantitative research mainly involves establishing internal validity, which indicates the strength of the relation between cause and effect. External validity, which refers to the possibility of generalized findings. Validity in qualitative tradition. Validity in qualitative research is a complex issue, as the qualitative paradigm advocates there is no one truth that can be achieved and also considers knowledge as subjective. Hence, the criteria for establishing validity can only be generic and subjective. Thus, validity in qualitative research involves determining the degree to which researchers' claims about knowledge corresponds to the research participants' construction of reality being studied involved. In order to judge the soundness of qualitative research, Guba and Lincoln suggested several alternative criteria wherein the traditional criteria of internal and external validity of quantitative research get translated into credibility and transferability. Credibility involves establishing that the results of qualitative research are believable from the perspective of the participants. The phenomena of interest are described strictly from the participants' eyes, and the participants are the only one judging credibility of research. Transferability refers to the degree to which the results of qualitative research can be generalized or transferred to other contexts or settings. It isn't an easy task in qualitative research. It is the primary responsibility of the qualitative researcher. The qualitative researcher can enhance transferability by thoroughly describing the research context and the assumptions that were central to the research. To transfer the results to a different context, the researcher is then responsible for making the judgment of how sensible the transfer is. Later, the concepts of authenticity and morality were also added as validity criteria. Authenticity refers to the fact that the real purpose of the research is clear. Research serves to give voice to the participants and empowers them. Reciprocity is ensured by determining what has been given back to the community via research endeavor. Respect of researcher-participant relationship is maintained. Morality or ethical validity involves recognition that the choices we make through the research process have political and ethical considerations. Is research helpful to target population? Are there alternative explanations? Did we really learn something? Two general approaches to validity in qualitative research. Over the years, two quite different approaches to the validity question within the literature on qualitative research have emerged. One approach, the transactional approach, is grounded in active interaction between the inquiry and the research participants by means of an array of techniques. Second, a more fundamental approach challenges the very notion of validity, even a constructed one. This challenge, or so to say rejection of validity, judges work to be valid only if it signals towards eventually achieving an ideal condition for which the research process was carried out. We call this transactional validity. It is an interactive process between the researcher, the researched, and the collected data which aims to achieve a higher level of accuracy and consensus by means of revisiting facts, feelings, experiences, and values or beliefs collected and interpreted. Validity as a transactional process consists of techniques or methods by which misunderstanding can be adjusted and thus fixed. In most cases, informants are engaged in making sure their realities corresponds with the interpretations brought forth by the researcher. It works towards establishing the credibility of qualitative research. The active interaction between the inquiry and the research participants is facilitated through array of techniques which are described hereunder. Member checking. It is the most crucial technique for establishing credibility. It is a process that occurs throughout the inquiry in which collected data is played back to the informant to check for perceived accuracy and reactions. It is hoped that the informants agree that reconstructions of their account by the researcher are fair, even if they are not in total agreement with them. If not, it is necessary on the part of the researcher to note this incongruity. The qualitative researchers are required to record and write accurately, seek feedback, and report fully. Bracketing. In qualitative research project, the researcher is the sole instrument for analysis across all phases of the research. Thus, the transmission of the researcher's subjective assumptions, values, interests, and emotions is inevitable within and across the research project. Bracketing is a method used by researchers to reduce the potential deleterious effects of unacknowledged preconceptions related to the research and thereby to increase the effectiveness of the project. Several methods of bracketing are writing memos throughout data collection and reflecting upon the researcher's engagement with the data. Memos can take the form of theoretical notes which explain the cognitive process of conducting research. methodological notes that explicate the procedural aspects of research, and observational comments that allow the researchers to explore feeling about the research endeavor. Engaging in interviews with an outside source to uncover and bring into awareness preconceptions and biases. Bracketing interviews can uncover themes that may hinder the researcher's ability to listen to respondents or trigger emotional responses in a researcher that may foreclose on further exploration. Maintaining a reflexive journal in which preconceptions are identified throughout the research process and enhances the researcher's ability to sustain a reflexive stance. Aspects to explore in the reflexive journal include the researcher's reason for undertaking the research, assumptions regarding gender, sexual orientation, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, the researcher's place in the power hierarchy of the research, the researcher's personal value system, potential role conflicts with research participants, feelings such as blame or disengagement that may indicate presuppositions, and whether the researcher choose to write in the first or third person. Triangulation. Triangulation method used by qualitative researchers check and establish validity in research studies by analyzing a research question from multiple perspectives. There are 5 types of triangulations. Data triangulation involves using different sources of information in order to increase the validity of a study. It is the most popular and easiest to implement. Investigator triangulation involves using several different investigators in the analysis process. If the findings from the different evaluators arrive at the same conclusion, then our confidence in the findings would be heightened. Theory triangulation involves the use of multiple perspectives to interpret a single set of data. This method also entails using professionals outside of a particular field of study. It is believed that individuals from different disciplines or positions bring different perspective. Methodological triangulation involves the use of multiple qualitative and or quantitative methods to study the program. For example, results from surveys, focus group and interviews can be compared to see if similar results are being found. Environmental triangulation, the use of different locations, settings and other key factors related to the environment in which the study took place, such as the time, day or season. The key is identifying which environmental factor, if any, might influence the information that is received during the study. If the findings remain the same under varying environmental conditions, then validity has been established. Transformational validity. The idea of validity as transformational begins with the problem of validation that concerns some qualitative researchers' interest in making explicit the value-laden nature of social, cultural and political meaning in macro and micro context. It is mostly acceptable that meanings are social constructions and multiple perspectives on a topic yield multiple meanings. Hence, in this respect, validity is not something that can be achieved only by way of applying certain explicit techniques. Alternative notions of validity should be considered within the goal of achieving social justice, deeper understanding, broader vision and other legitimate aim of qualitative research. In this respect, validity of a research is decided by the resultant action prompted by the research endeavor. Methodologically, researchers purpose a transgressive approach to validity that emphasizes a higher degree of self-reflexivity. For example, qualitative researchers are encouraged to examine meaning that are taken for granted and to engage in analytic practices in which meaning are both deconstructed and reconstructed in a way that makes initial connotations more relevant. The validity propositions involving transformational approach consist of catalytic validity, described as the degree to which the research empowers and emancipates the research subjects, and also pragmatic validity that raises the issue of power, that is, where is the power to decide the desired result of a study. Validity and the purpose of qualitative research. The validity concerns differ with respect to different purposes of undertaking qualitative research. We shall now look upon how the process view of validity is embedded in the Don-Moyer's framework of 5 overarching purposes capturing contemporary qualitative research. Validity in the truth-seeking purpose. Truth-seeking tradition of qualitative inquiry believes that there should be correspondence between a researcher's account of some phenomenon and what has actually happened or been constructed to happen. The researcher employs a conceptual framework that guides data collection and analysis in a very technical way. The primary concern here is identifying causal relationships and to draw grand conclusions that can be transferable to other contexts. Validity as a process in this purpose is progressive induction, through which data needs to be collected, analyzed, interpreted, triangulated, and thus represented through a credible corresponding account. The major validity criterion is the use of technical member checks and triangulation. Member checking reassures the accuracy of the participants' constructions, and triangulation verifies and checks specific facts collected across data sources. Thus, the truth-seeking tradition solely employs the transactional approach to validity concerns. Validity in the thick description purpose. This tradition focuses on explaining unique idiosyncratic meaning and perspectives constructed by individuals and groups who live in a particular context. It lays heavy emphasis on constructing text in which rich descriptions are salient that facilitates analytic interpretations. Advocates of this thick description purpose believe that correspondence between actualities and text is neither possible nor necessary. Advocates of the thick description purpose believe that correspondence between actualities and text is neither possible nor necessary. It is the interpretive component that matters. Validity as a process in the thick description purpose is holistic and necessitates prolonged engagement. Given the fact that meanings that people construct are typically unique, thus their understanding should take into account all things as a whole. Furthermore, an understanding of participants' worldviews under study may be insufficient without situating meaning or context. Hence, prolonged engagement from the side of researcher is viewed as a necessary condition. Major validity criteria that should be implemented are: number 1, the extent to which data are descriptively presented; number 2, the researcher's competence in making sense of the daily life of his or her participants; number 3, recursive member checking and triangulation as transactional assurances. Transactional methods are apparent, but the notion of transformative validity may also come into play in this purpose. Validity in the development purpose. This purpose basically involves investigation of what happens over time and an inquiry into explaining how things may progress stage by stage. Validity as a process in the developmental purpose falls into categorical schemes or stages that consist of a series of mutually exclusive themes or developments specific to a period of time. The major validity criteria conducting ongoing member checks rather than a wholesale members check at the end of the research report process, and also to triangulate the data obtained. Validity in the developmental purpose is mostly transactional, but can also be transformational if the primary purpose of the research account has an impact on subsequent organizational developments. Validity in the personal essay purpose. The primary concern of the personal essay purpose is with explaining the meanings that the researched construct. However, in this the researcher's subjectivity is intentionally foregrounded in research reports. The emphasis of the personal essay purpose is on personal encounter with experience and encounters with individuals' construction of personal experiences. The validity processes in this purpose is described as reflexive and aesthetic stance adopted by the researcher in creating the research account. Validity criteria include self-assessment of experience and public appeal of personal option. Self-assessment refers to the exclusive demonstration of the researcher's construction of self on his or her own. The experiential understanding of self surrounding any issue should be represented in a public appeal of personal opinion that makes it possible to help the reader come to a new way of understanding an event under investigation. Transformative validity seems self-evident in personal essay purpose. Validity in the praxis social change purpose. A key aspect of the praxis social change purpose of qualitative research lies in the relationship between researchers and researched. In order for authentic change to occur, collaborative relationships between researcher and researched should be manifested during the research process. Authority, power or privilege deployed from the side of researcher need to be deconstructed. Validity as a process in this purpose requires inquiry with and on behalf of participants. Validity claims in this purpose are determined by the extent to which the participants are collaboratively involved co-researchers in the research process as co-researchers. The major validity criteria are member checks as reflexive, the constant backward and forward confirmation with the participants under study in regards to reconstructions of their constructions. Reflexive member checkings seeks to illuminate a better representation of the lived experience of the participants being studied. Critical reflexivity of self. The researcher should openly express how his or her own subjectivity has progressively been challenged and thus transformed as he or she collaboratively interact with his or her participants, and redefinition of the status quo in which readers are able to differently perceive the world in which we live and to actively engage themselves in changing this world. Validity in the praxis social change purpose is significantly transformative in essence. A holistic view of validity in qualitative research. Employment of various methods such as bracketing, member checking and triangulation from the side of researcher has little to do with the guarantee of report's credibility and does not completely ensure validity. The use of transactional validity techniques can be a necessary but never sufficient condition. Researchers have proposed an inclusive discourse of validity in qualitative research by reflecting heavily on what matters specific to the problem. The process of validity inquiry does not create a distinctive either or choice between transactional validity criteria and transformational validity aims. The holistic views values a recursive open process in qualitative inquiry and provides us an analytic tool by which to identify an operational relationship among the research purposes, questions and processes. The holistic conception considers the evolving nature of new purposes, yet to be imagined representations and a fluidity that is accepting and accumulating new knowledge rather than rejecting and separating it. It emphasizes a recursive validity in which the informants are involved throughout the inquiry, not just during often brief data collection, and their perspectives are valued seriously and over time. A researcher's account is taken to be validated if it is polyvocal and the themes that emerge in the report resonate with other similar research projects. Finally, the eclectic approach to validity support narrative reconstructions that makes overt the validity approaches incorporated and the regions behind it. The emphasis here is on the explanations of researchers' moves, thoughts and theories. Summary: accounting for validity is a lot more complex and laborious task in qualitative research than in quantitative research, as the latter propagates the view of a single external reality while the former holds the notion of multiple realities. Validity in qualitative research is tried to establish by determining the congruence between researchers' claim about knowledge and the research participants' construction of reality that is being studied. The major criteria for judging the validity of qualitative research endeavor mainly involves establishing credibility, transferability, authenticity of the researcher's account and ensuring of morality and ethical values during the research process. The two general approaches to validity are transactional approach, which involves active interaction between the researcher and the participants by means of an array of techniques, and transformational approach that focuses on the emancipatory nature of research, seeks to empower the researched via the research process and advocates to achieve social justice, deeper understanding and broader vision on the research topic. An attempt to seek alternative view of validity is made by probing Don Moyer's framework of 5 purposes in qualitative research and extending it to the issue of validity. Lastly, it has been suggested that a variety of purposeful approaches can be combined by the qualitative researchers in order to obtain holistically valid results.
Validity stands for the resultant action of several empirical concepts: objectivity, evidence, deduction, mathematical data, etc. Validity, backed up by these concepts, represents the evidences that support the inferences made by the researcher of the test scores. The main concern of validity is to allow the generalizability of the test results, that is, the conclusion derived on the basis of the test can be generalized to the general population. The principal form of validity that the researcher aims to establish are internal validity, the extent to which the test establishes causal relationships, and external validity, the extent to which there is a possibility to generalize findings. The main validity criteria is checking for the credibility and transferability of the researcher's account. These two concepts can be referred as synonymous to internal and external validity in quantitative research. Credibility is confirming that the results of qualitative research are believable from the perspective of the participant, and transferability refers to the degree to which the results of qualitative research can be generalized or transferred to other contexts or settings. Additional validity criteria described later are authenticity, which is the fact that the real purpose of the research is clear, using the research endeavor as a medium to empower the participants and ensuring reciprocity in the process. Morality involves recognition that the choices we make through the research process have political and ethical consideration. The general approaches to validity can be enumerated as transactional validity and transformational validity. The main impetus of transactional approach to validity lies in the active interaction process between the inquirer and the research participant regarding the issue that is being studied. The interactive process between the researcher and the researched concerning the collected data is aimed at achieving a higher level of accuracy and consensus by means of revisiting facts, feelings, experiences, and values or beliefs collected and interpreted. This approach consists of a variety of techniques by which misunderstandings can be identified and thus fixed. Informants or research participants are thoroughly engaged in the research process to make sure that the researcher's interpretation of their account matches their realities. The techniques employed here thus serve as a medium to ensure an accurate reflection of the reality of research participant. This technique is most crucial for establishing the credibility of the research account. Within this, the collected data, along with the researcher's interpretation, is again presented before the research participants with the goal of looking at their reactions and checking for perceived accuracy from their part. It is hoped that the participant would testify the reconstructions of their account by the researcher as fair even if they are not in total agreement with them. If they find some incongruence, then the discrepancy is noted. The method mainly requires to record and write participants' construction of reality accurately, seek feedback, and report fully. Bracketing as a technique works to reduce these potential harmful effects of unacknowledged perceptions. The various methods used are writing memos. These take the form of theoretical notes which explain the cognitive process of conducting research, methodological notes that describes the procedural aspects of research, and observational comments that allow the researcher to explore feelings about the research venture. Engaging in interviews with an outside source to uncover and bring into awareness preconceptions and biases, and maintaining a reflexive journal in which preconceptions are identified throughout the research process and enhances the researcher's ability to sustain a reflexive stance. Aspects to be considered in the reflexive journal are the researcher's reasons for undertaking the research, assumptions regarding gender, sexual orientation, the researcher's place in the power, race, ethnicity, etc. Triangulation method is used by the researcher to establish validity by analyzing a research question from multiple perspectives. There are five types of triangulation: data triangulation, which involves using different sources of information; investigator triangulation, which involves using several different investigators in the analysis process; theory triangulation, which involves the use of multiple perspectives to interpret a single set of data; methodological triangulation, which involves employing multiple qualitative and or quantitative methods to a single research study; and environmental triangulation, which calls for the use of different locations, settings, and other key factors related to the environment in which the study took place, such as the time, day, or season. The primary validity concerns of transformational validity is to bring forth the social, cultural, and political meanings constructed by people in various contexts. This type of validity strives to transform social structure via the research process and action. In this approach, validity is aspired by achieving social justice, deeper understanding, broader visions, and other legitimate aims of qualitative research as a byprocess of the research venture. It is described much as the resultant action prompted by the research endeavor. Methodologically, researchers adopt a transgressive approach that emphasizes a higher degree of self reflexivity. Two main forms of this approach are catalytic validity, described as the degree to which the research empowers and emancipates the research subjects, and pragmatic validity, that raises the issue of power, that is, where is the power to decide the desired results of a study. Qualitative research works towards fulfilling different purposes for pursuing this kind of research by the inquirer. Going by the different purposes for undertaking the research, the validity concern also varies. Don Moyer's framework puts forward five overarching purposes embracing contemporary qualitative research and different view of validity process related to each purpose. Truth-seeking tradition of qualitative inquiry believes there should be correspondence between a researcher's account of some phenomena and what has actually happened or been construed to happen. The data collection and analysis is carried out in a very technical manner, that is, guided by a conceptual framework. The main objective is to identify causal relationships and to draw grand conclusions that is transferable to other contexts. Validity as a process involves progressive induction, relying on which data need to be collected, analyzed, interpreted, triangulated, and represented through a credible corresponding account. Major validity criteria are technical member checks and triangulation. Thick description tradition emphasizes that the researcher should construct texts in which rich descriptions regarding a phenomenon are salient. That facilitates with analytic interpretations. The descriptions should bring out unique, idiosyncratic meanings and perspectives that people have regarding the issue. The validity as a process requires the understanding of people's construction of reality should take into account all things as a whole. Furthermore, an understanding of participants' worldviews under study may be insufficient without situating meanings in context. Hence, prolonged engagement from the side of the researcher is viewed as a necessary condition. Major validity criteria are the extent to which data are descriptively presented, the researcher's competence in making sense of the daily life of their participants, and recursive member checking and triangulation. The developmental purpose in qualitative research investigates what happens over time and an inquiry into explaining how things make progress stage by stage. The researchers are concerned with collecting rich archives reflecting historical events or happenings relating to the issue of interest. Validity as a process in the developmental purpose falls into categorical schemes or stages that consist of a series of mutually exclusive themes or developments specific to a period of time. The major validity criteria requires conducting ongoing member checks rather than a wholesale member check at the end of the research report process and also to triangulate the data obtained. The personal essay purpose is mainly concerned with explaining the meanings that the research construct. But unlike the thick description tradition, here in construction of the participant's reality is immersed in researcher's subjectivity. The researcher's subjectivity is intentionally front and center in research reports and accounts, as this tradition values the researcher's intentional subjectivity in textual representation. The validity processes is described as reflexive and aesthetic stance adopted by the researcher in creating the research account. The validity criteria include self-assessment of experience and public appeal of personal opinion. Self-assessment refers to the exclusive demonstration of the researcher's construction of self on his or her own. The experiential understanding of self surrounding any issues should be represented openly in the form of personal opinion. In praxis or social change, purpose of qualitative tradition, the main focus lies in the relationship between researchers and researched. It assumes that in order for authentic change to occur, collaborative relationships between researcher and researched should be manifested during and after the research process. This purpose announces that authority, power, or privilege exhibited from the side of the researcher needs to be deconstructed. Validity as a process in this purpose involves inquiry with and on behalf of participants. Validity claims are determined by the extent to which participants are co researchers in the research process. The major validity criteria are member checks as reflexive, the constant backward and forward confirmation with the participants under study in regard to reconstructions of their constructions. Critical reflexivity of self. The researcher should openly express how his or her own subjectivity has progressively been challenged and thus transformed as he or she collaboratively interacts with his or her participants. And redefinition of the status quo, in which readers are able to differently perceive the world in which we live and to actively engage themselves in the changing world. The process of validity inquiry doesn't create a distinctive either or choice between transactional validity criteria and transformational validity aims. Most of the qualitative researchers recommend a holistic approach to estimating validity in the research, wherein different validity approaches are combined by the researcher by reflecting upon what matters most to the research problem. The holistic view values a recursive, open process and gives us an analytic view by which to identify an operational relationship among the research processes. It also considers the nature of purposes of qualitative inquiry, yet to be imagined representations, and accepts new knowledge rather than rejects or separates them. It values a recursive validity in which the informants are involved throughout the inquiry and not just during data collection. It supports narratives, constructions of the research account, and polyvocality, that is, the themes emerging from a research study should resonate with other similar research programs. To summarize, establishing validity is a complex issue in qualitative research as it propagates the notion of multiple realities rather an objective external reality. The main indicators of validity in qualitative research works are credibility, transferability, authenticity, and morality. Two general approaches to validity are transactional approach and transformational approach. Alternative view of validity is formed by probing Don Moyer's framework of five purpose in qualitative research and merging it with the issues of validity. A holistically valid result can be obtained by combining varieties of purposeful approaches.